Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus. Resilient. Highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here from Into 3 Fitness, and welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. This week, we have Aglaee Jacob, who is a dietitian and nutritionist, and I had a really great time talking with her, really because of her philosophy. If you've been listening to the podcast over the years or been following any of the content I've been putting out for a number of years, it's easy for us to get pigeonholed into one different camp, a camp of the paleo camp, the vegan camp, whatever. And I've definitely been there, but ever since I started coaching a lot of people in nutrition and also just doing more things myself and with my wife and family, I just really figured out that there is no one size fits all nutrition approach, especially in my experience. Well, Aglaee kind of echoes that times 100 because this is what she does, and she is a true expert in this field. So she has a book, Digestive Health with Real Food, and that's a lot of what we talk about today. We talk about gut health. We talk about having a relationship with food. We also talk about leaky gut and kind of her protocol to get over all of this stuff, because you might think that you have a gut issue, or maybe you have some of the symptoms for it, and she talks about all that, how to know some symptoms to be looking out for, some things that go unnoticed. So I would definitely check this one out. Most people, at least in my experience working with athletes, most people almost automatically assume that they're fine. I don't have any gut issues, but I just don't know if that's the case, guys. Depends on where your diet's at. I really would listen to this one and take an honest assessment of how you feel, what you experienced during the week based off of some of the things that she says. And good news is she has a great book, and also she talks about how to heal your gut and kind of how to go through that process. It starts with a pretty epic story when we first open up about her being in a South American jungle and contracting a parasite. Really Hollywood level stuff here. It was really great. I'm not going to steal any more of her thunder, but you guys enjoy it. I know I did. Had a lot of great questions, a lot of great responses from Aglaee. So here we go. Without any further ado, Aglaee Jacob. All right, Aglaee, welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. I am pumped to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, let's get it done. So we start with these challenges, and it's really to get to know you and kind of the back end of your brain a little bit, but also truly to challenge our listeners and to get them started up and fired up for their week. So we're going to start with a fitness challenge. What do you have for us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm no fitness expert, but I would like to approach this from perhaps another perspective. And my fitness challenge would be for any kind of movement or exercise you'll be doing this week, try to be in your body as you exercise, because too often we move our body, we exercise, we work out, but we're kind of in our head and just thinking about what we should be doing and how we need to do it, or maybe thinking about what we will be doing next or what we did before. But my challenge would be to be in your body and really to feel your muscle moving, your blood circulating in your body, your heart pumping harder, and just really practice being present in your body for the next time and see how that feels.
I love that. So mindful fitness, I think that can really go a long way and just helping you learn more about yourself and how your body actually operates in that environment.
Yeah.
All right. How about a mental toughness challenge?
Okay. So one of there's so many ways, so many things I could say, but I guess it would be about, it's normal for everyone to not feel 100% all the time, and we can feel a bit, sad or not quite, super happy all the time. And in those times, we often see those memes push and, just put a smile on and, think positive. And that's, a lot of the things we hear is to use the power of our mind to push those quote unquote negative feelings away. But I think that it's not always healthy to do. And yes, sometimes we need to push through, but sometimes there's also a time and place for us to feel those feelings that are harder to feel. Because if we don't, then we're just going to be bottling up the more negative emotions and won't be able to handle, deal, and heal with the root of those more quote unquote negative emotions. So my mental toughness challenge would be next time you don't feel super happy, whether you're sad, angry, feeling grief, or afraid, just sit with that for 5 minutes and try to just feel the feeling, and you'll see that it may just dissipate on its own without you having to push through it.
That's awesome. I love what you just said, the handle, deal, and heal. That's such a awesome thing that we just should all keep in mind when we're running into those different emotions throughout the day. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, and how about a book recommendation?
Well, it's not a very recent book, but I love Katie Bowman. She wrote so many different books. She's a biomechanist, and I'm just in love with her work. And the book "Move Your DNA" is kind of a book she wrote maybe 4 years ago now, but it's such a good way to learn about different types of movements and think of movement from another way, and even like furniture-free living and all of the different movements we do in our daily life, and how we can optimize our mobility and our ability to move through life with ease.
I have not read that book, but it sounds very interesting, so I'll definitely check it out. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if you could take us as far back as you'd like to into your background. I know you have, some personal battles that have kind of led you down to where you are right now. So, I mean, like I said, take us back as far as you feel like you need to, and then bring us up to today, what you're working on and what you're most passionate about.
All right. Okay. So get your little cup of tea and sit down for a little story. No. So maybe, I'll take you. Well, okay. When I was 15, I decided that I wanted to study nutrition. And the reason why I wanted to study nutrition was so that I could finally find the magical answer to my weight issues, which were not really weight issues, but I felt like I could lose a few pounds. And I thought that by becoming a dietitian, I would finally learn all of the magical answers so that I could be at the perfect ideal weight that I wanted to be at. And well, long story short, when I entered dietetic school, I learned about the food guide and, the kind of the My Plate. I'm in Canada, but it's very similar to what's happening in the US, and all of this thing about, grains and dairy and calorie counting and all of that. And it just made me kind of go very crazy with food and trying to control every single bite and track calories and kind of dissociate from my own body. So I really learned that I couldn't trust my own body, that I needed to look at the labels and all of these things that were external to me and listen to what other people had to say, rather than trust my own body, because I felt like my body was betraying me constantly by not being at the weight that I wanted to be. So for a long time, I feel like I was fighting against my body, trying to make it a size that it didn't want to be. And it caused a lot of emotional and mental suffering. And it caused me to have a very unhealthy relationship with food, and even an eating disorder called binge eating disorder. So going from one extreme of the spectrum of restricting, wanting to control and fasting and all of that, to the other side of the spectrum where you lose complete control and feel like crap, both physically, mentally, and also emotionally as well. So that's kind of one side of this story, which not everybody knows about. And parallel to that, after I graduated dietetic school, I went on to travel to work as a dietitian, and I found a job working as a certified diabetes educator. So teaching people with type 2 diabetes what to eat to control their blood sugar and avoid long-term complications. And of course, I had to follow the Canadian diabetes guideline, which are very similar, again, to what's happening in the States. And after a couple of years of doing that, I felt just really discouraged, because to me, I really wanted to believe in food as medicine, but I was starting to lose faith because those guidelines were just not helping people to the degree that I thought it would. Like, so many people were coming to me with type 2 diabetes, and they were already trying so hard to eat healthy. And the guidelines recommend people to eat. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with, they're probably familiar with carbohydrates quite a bit. So, eating like whole grains and those quote unquote complex carbs, even though that doesn't mean much, eating like 45 to 75 grams of carbohydrates per meal. But yet it was just not giving them the result they should. They still struggled with their blood sugars. And at that point, I got really discouraged to the point that I sold everything I owned and went travel in South America for a few months, doing some volunteering and just exploring and to try to figure out what I wanted to do next. And it came to me in a very unexpected way. When during that trip, I was in the Peruvian jungle and I had about a food poisoning, and I actually caught a parasite which completely messed up my gut flora. I was really, I hit rock bottom with my health for many months. Even after treating the parasite with antibiotics, it was just, my gut was a mess. Like I was bloated, like I looked like I was 6-7 months pregnant all the time. And I had abdominal pain and cramping. And of course, all of the things that can happen in the bathroom as a result of that. And it also went beyond the gut. It affected my mood and also caused me to have issues with my sleep. And I also have weird skin rashes. I was so fatigued. Anyway, things were not going well for me. And it's at that point that I kind of rekindled that hope that food could be medicine. And I felt like, there must be something I can do with food to try to heal myself, because the food we eat, it's so connected to our gut. Like that's where our food travels, where things get digested and absorbed. And even though I had studied as a dietitian, there wasn't much in my training to teach me what to do. We learned a little bit about Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and those sort of things, but I felt really lost, and I had to really throw away everything I had learned in my, not everything, but a lot of what I had learned out the window and start from scratch again. And I studied again biochemistry and relearn. I spent hours and hours and hours learning everything I could about gut health and gut healing through food and supplements and all of the natural things I could do to heal myself. And as you can imagine, because I'm the author of the book Digestive Health with Real Food, it worked. And I was able to find a natural approach to eliminate the food that can irritate and cause inflammation in the gut, and how to rebuild the gut flora, restore the gut lining so that we can have a healthy digestion again. And I've helped many other people do the same. And that's why I decided to share that knowledge in my book. I published the first edition in 2013, and we just revised it and updated it last year in 2018. So there's a new expanded second edition that's now out too. So that's kind of a bit of my story that in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I mean, I think they could make a movie about that, going down into a South American jungle and getting a parasite. And, it's just such an incredible story and journey that you've been on. Now, I do want to know, so after you got the parasite, I want to kind of know a little bit more about like the immediate, like were you in a pretty bad condition like right away from having the parasite, or did it take a while? Like how does that actually show up in the person?
There was that first initial kind of food poisoning. When that happened, there was a lot of feeling very unwell, and I was actually on right after leaving the jungle, I was on a almost 30-hour bus ride through the Andes, which would make anybody nauseous, but that was even worse. A lot of vomiting and a lot of feeling unwell through all of that. So there was the initial 2 or 3 days of maybe almost a week where I could basically not eat. I was feeling so unwell. And then things got better. And that's the thing with parasites sometimes, is that it can be cyclical. And also I want to mention that there's a type of IBS. IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome. A lot of people with IBS actually have post-infectious IBS. So this is IBS that develops after having any kind of infection, which can be some episode of traveler's diarrhea or food poisoning. So that's kind of a mix of what I had here with the parasite and post-infectious IBS. So sometimes it can take a few weeks, months, or even a year or two before post-infectious IBS appears, and symptoms can progressively start worsening. For me, within 1 or 2 months, then things started going downhill pretty quickly. But there were phases. It was a bit cyclical and very hard to predict. And there was also a lot happening in my life at that time, with a lot of moving and traveling and figuring things out. But it was a bit of a mess.
Yeah, and so you started to focus on gut health, which really, restored the overall issue, and you've helped a lot of people do that. And I don't think that that's something a lot of people know. So I was wondering if you could go kind of broad in that, like, how does health really begin in our guts?
Yes, and that's a famous quote from Hippocrates: "All diseases start in the gut, and therefore health starts in the gut." It's interesting because so many people, and probably many of your listeners, care about what they eat, and they know how important it is to eat the best food we can to feel as well as we want to feel. But if we don't have gut health, how are we going to be able to digest and absorb those nutrients and the food we eat? So we may be buying the best quality food possible, but if we don't have optimal gut health, we're kind of throwing that money down the toilet. So a lot of the nutrients that isn't that super healthy food that we're eating won't be absorbed, won't be digested, and will just end up being flushed down the toilet with your poop. So we really need to have optimal gut health to be able to put on muscle mass, because I believe a lot of your listeners may be doing some strength training and those kind of workouts. But also, we need that for optimal health, to have adequate energy, and we also need to have healthy digestion. Also is associated with a healthy gut flora, which helps prevent so many chronic diseases, which help boost our immune system. So people that are getting sick all the time may actually have an inadequate gut flora. There's also a link with autoimmune condition, which we know are on the rise so much these days. So autoimmune condition include things like Hashimoto thyroiditis, which is one of the most common form of hypothyroidism. It includes there's psoriasis, there's type 1 diabetes, there's so many that, like rheumatoid arthritis, like there's a list of over 100 different autoimmune conditions. And we now know that having a leaky gut, or having too much permeability in the gut, because our gut needs to be permeable enough to allow the nutrients to enter our bloodstream, but not too permeable, because we want to avoid the toxins and other bad stuff that should stay in our poop and be eliminated down the toilet. We want to prevent that from going in our bloodstream. And sometimes if our gut is too leaky or too permeable, then there might be things that enter our body, enter our bloodstream, and that can cause our immune system to become confused and start attacking itself, which is pretty much the root of autoimmune conditions. So, yeah, do you think gut health is important? Have I convinced you?
Yeah, it sounds very important. Now, picking up like kind of right where you left off, how does one get leaky gut?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because the term leaky gut, like some doctors will not agree with that, even though if you look on PubMed, which is a search engine for scientific articles, and you use the more scientific term, increased intestinal permeability, there are really hundreds and hundreds, perhaps even 1,000 at this point, articles on that topic. So it's something that's definitely real, but that most conventional doctors don't talk about. And increased intestinal permeability, or leaky gut, is something that that is affected by many things. We know that our diet can affect it. So eating a diet that contains a lot of processed food and sugar that can lead to an unhealthy gut flora can definitely contribute to that. There might be things like pesticide residues and other things found in our food that can contribute to that as well. There's also a lack of sleep and too much stress in our life. We know that can be a factor to increase our risk of leaky gut. And there's even overtraining that can make us more at risk for having leaky gut. So it's not that training is bad, but there's always, a bell curve kind of pattern, and not enough of something is bad and too much of a good thing can also be bad. So it's kind of like that. So yeah, there are many different things that can affect our gut, and we talk about health a lot, but I think that one of the factors that is sometimes not talked about enough is the impact of stress, which is so chronic in our society. Everybody is always on a rush, go, doing, and not resting enough, and worrying and overthinking too much. And that can be it can be really harmful for our gut health and overall health.
Now, I know one thing about you, and I find it really awesome, is that you don't necessarily take a one-size-fits-all approach to helping people correct their digestive issues. So what is a common process, or what do you walk people through to help them find out kind of what works for them?
Yes. Oh my God. That's one thing that drives me crazy because there are so many books written about digestion and how to heal your gut and fix your gut and all of that. And they all have like this magical answer that will help everyone. But here's the truth. Like, everybody is different. What will work for me will not work for everyone else. And that's the thing with a lot of people online, a lot of coaches, like they found something that worked for them, and they want to share that with everyone else, which comes from a good intent. But what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So that's why with my approach, I really try to help people take their power back in helping them reconnect with their own body, to learn to trust their own body again, and to learn how they can use the guideline of an elimination diet and reintroduction diet to figure out what works for their own body, so that they can design their own personal optimal diet that will give them the lifelong results that they want. So it's not always easy to do. And for people that have been eating kind of a standard American diet, or that have been feeling awful or pretty crappy for a little while, it's not easy to do because they feel so unwell all the time, or they may feel also very disconnected from their own body, or they just don't trust their body anymore. So that's why I usually start with an elimination diet. And an elimination diet sounds not very appealing, but because yes, it's about eliminating foods that are most likely to be problematic for most people. Things like gluten and certain grains and sugar and foods that are high in FODMAPs. And I go into more details about what FODMAPs are in the book, and a lot of processed foods and foods that are high in omega-6, which can be inflammatory and all of that. And there are many different versions of the elimination diet. So when I work one-on-one with people, I can help them depending on their current symptom, the intensity, severity of their symptoms, and what their past diet has been, to design an elimination diet that will work best for them. And in my book, there's also 3 different levels of the elimination diet, as well as a little questionnaire so that people can choose which level is best for them. And then from then, we do that elimination diet for 3 to 4 weeks as a way to reset the gut and calm the symptoms. For a lot of people, they will notice that the bloat goes away, the flatulence, the reflux, all of these weird things that, and if they were suffering from diarrhea or constipation, that can go away as well. And it just feels, they feel more connected to their body. Like it's easier to hear what's happening when it's not like the background noise is lower to a more normal levels. And then at that point, so really elimination diet, we eliminate food, but the goal is really to eliminate the symptoms so that we can move on to the reintroduction phase, where we ideally reintroduce food one at a time every 3 to 4 days to assess how every single food you introduce affects your body. And it can sound like a bit of a tedious process, but if you do it right, you only need to do it once. And I know a lot of people may be tempted to do those food intolerance tests out there, which may help, but none of them are 100% accurate. And the gold standard really is always and will always be the elimination diet and reintroduction protocol. And it's also the best way to give you the lifelong tool to reconnect and trust your body so that you can always find your own answers without having to rely on anything external to you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great framework. And yeah, so you don't think some of those tests are they're maybe 80% helpful? What's your real take on those?
I think it depends on the person. Like if someone is really motivated to do the elimination diet and that's great. But if someone finds that they're not willing or they don't feel like it's worth it to eliminate things like gluten or any other food, and they just need more data, more proof, then I think it might be worth doing those kind of tests. But I really use it more as a way for people that may be more like they may overanalyze, overthink, and they need the data and proof and evidence. I think it's more in that way that it can be helpful to guide our work together.
Yeah, and one thing I know about anyone who works with people in anything related to nutrition, you're going to run into not just the mechanics of what to eat, what not to eat, but there's going to be somewhere where you run into someone's relationship with food, and that being an issue. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
That is so true because, I'm sure you meet people all the time that feel like they know what they should be eating, but then sticking to it is another problem. And no matter what your goal is, whether your goal is to improve your gut health or any other kind of health issue or just to feel better overall, we all have our different barriers. And sometimes the more diets we've been on, and even sometimes we don't really call them diet, but we can call them lifestyle, but any kind of ways, approaches, protocols that we try that restrict some food, that may make some food quote unquote bad or unhealthy or not as good, it can really start affecting our relationship with food. And I see so many people that are just trying so hard to eat the quote unquote right food, but sabotaging themselves over and over again, whether it is because of overeating, because they're just not able, they just don't realize that they're not eating enough while they're on the elimination diet. And then their body is just really smart because the body wants to survive and pushes them to overeat to make sure that they don't die. So that can be one way we sabotage, or there might be something emotional that comes up, some kind of stress, and then there might be some emotional eating that happens that can make people feel pretty horrible because it can exacerbate some of their digestive symptoms and then make them feel like a failure and like they're never going to get that right. And there's all of that inner self-talk that can be very negative and put people down a spiral that can be really hard to get out of. And yeah, there's a lot of sabotage that can happen too for so many different reasons. And yeah, I think that this is one of the most interesting aspects of the work that I do with clients, is to really learn more about this relationship that people have with food. And it may sound strange to say relationship with food when food is not a person, but really relationship in that way is more about the way we approach food and what it means to us, how we use food. And because we say food should only be fuel. yes, it is mostly fuel. It gives us the energy and nutrients we need, but it's also so much more than that. It's a lot about connection and love for many of us as we grow up. It's an integral part of our family gathering, and it's also very it's something that we use for many different social events. So, and it's also a way that many of us learn to comfort ourselves whenever something either sad or happy happens. So it's associated with so many different things. And it's not bad that food is not only fuel, because I think that's what makes us human. We have those more extra layers of complexity around food, but it's an added challenge for many of us, and it was for me too, having struggled with a disordered eating and even an eating disorder, and learning to find the nourishment that most of us are craving and are not getting from food only, and that we were never taught how to get that nourishment from other sources, like really rest and play and having fun and true heart-to-heart connection and laughing and all of these other nutrients that nourish us beyond what food can do for us too.
And so I do want to ask, as a dietitian and nutritionist, you've worked with a lot of people, and you're really good at helping people get results, and also, like we just talked about, helping people, maybe change their view or their relationship with food. But that last part, helping someone change their relationship with food, dives much deeper into almost, psychology. How did you get good at that part of what it takes to help someone get through, to health?
Well, there's a combination of what is the quote again? Like experience. I don't remember, but anyway, it was a lot about my own personal experience first, because I struggled with an eating disorder for 2 decades, pretty much, almost 2 decades. So I know what's happening, like the different patterns between our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, because that's all so interconnected. The way we think affects the way we feel, and that affects the way we behave, the actions and the decisions that we take, and then that affects our reality, and vice versa. So I have a personal insight on that, and having been able to heal myself from that, I'm able to use the same tools with other people as well. I've also read, like I'm a lifelong student. I love reading and learning from so many other experts out there through podcasts and books. And also I took a certification through the Path of Self-Love School. So I'm also a self-love guide. And this was, I've studied for 2.5 years with the Path of Self-Love School, practicing a lot of different tools, because really when it comes to our relationship with food and healing at a deeper level, because yes, gut health is important, and we can heal a lot of it on the first layer of it being the body, the physical level. But if we want true holistic healing, we also need to address the mind, which is our thoughts and the way we think. We need to address the heart and our emotions and how we feel, and even the soul and the spiritual aspect of our being, if we want to go there too. So I really feel like true holistic healing should be an integration of all of these layers: body, mind, heart, and soul. So yes, and I've been and also working with so many clients and seeing how there are so many ways that we can relate to food, and I think that's what allowed me to put that into practice and to connect the dots, and really I learned so much from my clients on a daily basis, and that's what I think that's what helps also, is that I never feel like I have all of the answer for anyone. I'm never there to say, oh, here's what you need to do. I know everything about you, and that's going to work, and go and just do it. Like, I'm really here to sit with my clients and really be curious and not judge them, and allowing them to finally be more aware and honest with themselves and with me than they've ever been in their own life, that's where true healing really starts, when we work together.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think, part of the reason I asked that question as a coach myself, on the fitness side of things, you run into the same kind of stuff. It's not just like, well, here are your workouts, go get fitter. There's always a different layer that has to be peeled back. And yeah, a lot of it is just being with your client and, learning from them and helping them the best way possible.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to know, so it sounds like if you have a serious gut issue or a parasite, it's very obvious, right? Like that you need to get taken care of. What about, do you think there are gut issues that can go on, relatively unnoticed, that anyone who's listening to this who's like, you know what, I don't think I have any gut issues. Is there anything that they should be looking out for? Or maybe, take a second to really review?
Well, I would just also go back and say that for a parasite infection is not always obvious. And some people, it may, because of its cyclical nature, and also because some people have been feeling unwell for so long and have had gut issues for as long as they can remember, even since they were a child. It has become their new normal, and they may have a parasite, but it's not always obvious. So I just wanted to put that out there. And in terms of people that are not sure if they need to really be concerned about their digestion right now, I would say that for anyone who suffer with any of the symptoms I'm going to list more than once or twice a week, it might be a good idea to just look at their digestion a bit more closely. For example, if you suffer from bloating more than a couple of times a week, for many people, they think bloating is normal. And yes, it's normal to have a little bit of distension of our abdomen after eating. But for many people, if they need to undo their pants, or they really get uncomfortable after eating, that can become a degree of bloating that indicate that there's something not quite right in the way the gut is working. Also, in terms of bowel movements, let's go there. We should poop daily. And even 2 to 3 times a day is ideal. So between once and 3 times a day is what we're looking for. If you skip a day or more every week, then there might be something that is preventing your gut from working properly. And same thing, if you have to go more than 3 times a day, then there's something that's not quite right either. And that may make it more difficult for your body to have enough time to properly digest and absorb the nutrients that you need. So that's that. And also the appearance of your stools, if it's unformed or if it looks like rabbit pellets, like ideally, normal, healthy bowel movements should look like kind of like a sausage. So be pretty smooth, easy to pass. We shouldn't see any undigested food particles. It should obviously be brown. So if there's any other colors, or if it's lighter in color and floats in the toilet, those are all indicator that it might be something to look at more closely in terms of your digestion. And if you have any episodes of reflux or a lot of flatulence, those are also signs that you may want to look closer at your gut health. And even if you don't have any of these symptoms that I've just listed, if you suffer from an autoimmune condition or skin issues or a brain fog, or if your energy levels are not where you'd like them to be, then I would also encourage you to look at what you can do to optimize your digestion, because it could definitely be connected.
And so your book is, digestive health with real food. And so you just want to ask the obvious question for anyone out there who wants to check out your book. What do you mean by real food? What's your definition of that?
Yeah, real food is food that's as close to nature as possible. My book, real food is food that is low, like anti-inflammatory, low irritant, easy to digest. That's also nutrient dense, as little processed as possible, and that's also closest to what has been part of the human diet for thousands and thousands of years. So that's my definition.
Okay, awesome. And before we get to the quick fire questions of the show, I did see on your Instagram profile and your website that you refer to yourself as the non-diet dietitian. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that I don't subscribe to any kind of diet. Like I used to, I have done all the things myself, like low carb and keto and paleo and primal and all of these different things. And that used, if we go back in my history of my online presence, there were times where I was really pro paleo, pro all of these different types of diets because they were working well for me at the time, and of course they worked well for my clients too. But now I found that it can be so individual, and our bodies are all different. Our bodies always change, and they keep changing throughout our life, and they keep changing throughout the year too, depending on the season and what we're doing and what's happening. And I've also had a kid, so during pregnancy and postpartum, our needs are always different. So I don't feel like there's any diet that works for everyone, or even any one diet that works for one person forever. So that's why I'm the non-diet dietitian, because I really want people to not feel like they have to follow anything that other people tell them to do. I really want people to be able to learn from their own body, and that's kind of that connection with the body that I help people to cultivate, so that they can learn to find their own answers for themselves. And that's the best way to know what to eat, because it may depend on any day, depending on what's going on, and to learn to be able to trust our body and to get those answers from our own body rather than follow any specific diet.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think that things do change, just personally, when I was younger, I really felt like I had even being into, fitness and nutrition, I really felt like I had no issues with dairy. There's nothing visible. I felt like I could consume it with no issues. I even did, because my wife wanted me to try it. She's a nutrition fanatic. So I eliminated dairy, for a long time, and then brought it back, and still absolutely no issue. But now, fast forward almost 10 years later, if I have a glass of milk, I'm going to have issues, either digestive, or I'll have some sort of acne, some sort of breakout, some sort of skin issue, relatively fast, within a couple days. And like you said, bodies change. Like that never used to be a thing. Like that was never an issue for me before. And now either my immune system got tired of dealing with it, or, I just changed to some degree. Like it's not something that my body wants to do anymore. So I think that's a really good takeaway.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean it's forever either. There might be other stressors in your life right now that makes your body a little bit less resilient to something in milk. I would be curious to know if other dairy products have the same impact on you. Have you tried any other?
Other things that I have tried that I have noticed I have a reaction to, because I'd been off of whey protein for such a long time. I reintroduced whey protein, tried to get the cleanest source available, and still had some pretty bad issues. And then also, specifically cheddar cheese. I went keto a while back, and I was doing kind of dirty keto where I was trying to meet my calories that I needed. So I would eat like these huge chunks of cheddar cheese, when I needed to, not every day, but when I needed to. And then also had some real bad skin issues, when I was doing that. So those are the main: milk, whey, and, specifically cheddar cheese are the ones that seem to bother me the most.
Okay. Yeah. With all of these three things, they all have like casein, whey, lactose. They all have different components, but so that probably eliminates dairy for you.
I'm done for now. I might try again in a few years, see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Like for example, there were times in my life where I couldn't do eggs at all, and I've eliminated them for a year. Even with tomatoes and almonds, like they can be things that our body doesn't chosen one for a while, and then you're able to reintroduce them later. So yeah, it's about going with the flow and listening to our bodies.
I love it. All right, well, let's get to the quick fire questions of the show. So what's the hardest workout you've ever done?
Can I say giving birth?
Yes, you can. I've been there 3 times with my wife just to witness it, and it seems like quite an intense workout. Yeah. Awesome. All right. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
What was one of the best activity for myself to build mental toughness, and something that I recommend? Okay, it's a quick fire question. I should answer more quickly, but it's about trying to do nothing, because we're so used to being busy and doing all the time, but just sitting with nothing, no distraction, not checking your phone, no music, nothing for even 2 minutes, like it can be quite a challenge. So trying that for 5-10 minutes, it doesn't have to be a formal meditation or breathing or anything, but just sitting with yourself, it can be really good to build mental toughness.
I think that's great. I want to double tap that. Anyone listening, challenge you. See if you could sit there and do nothing for at least 2 minutes. I think that's a great one. All right. Now, if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It would have to be a yoga mat for me.
Awesome. All right. Now, the question of the show. What's the best advice you have for becoming a better human? This is 100% open-ended.
I think it's self-awareness. It's just because sometimes all of these thoughts we have in our head, we can get so caught up in our thoughts and those stories that we tell ourselves and our assumptions and what we think any kind of thing that is happening to us mean, or what we think what other people say to us mean. But just becoming more aware of that, having that self-awareness to be willing to look at that with curiosity, like, oh, okay, is it really the truth? What I'm thinking here? Because sometimes we think that our thoughts are 100% true, but it's not the case. So being willing to look at our thoughts, be curious with them, and not take them for truth or as fact, and also making the distinction between the thoughts and ourselves, because our thoughts are not us, and creating more space between our thoughts and who we truly are in our core. I think that it allows us to better see the connection between the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave, and the actions and decisions we take in our life, and the life that we have as a result. So self-awareness would be my best advice that I wish everybody would cultivate and develop a bit more.
I think that's great. Now, I'm sure that we've only, skimmed or scratched the surface here of all the things that we could learn from you and dive into. So what's the best place for people to learn more about you and what you're doing?
Well, my favorite platform is Instagram, so people can search for Radicata Nutrition. I'm also under Radicata Nutrition on Facebook, and my website is radicatanutrition.com. Radicata is spelled Radicata. It actually comes from Latin and mean roots, because I like going to the roots of the real food that humans used to eat, and also the roots of the reason why we eat this way, the roots of our symptoms, why we're feeling this way. And so roots is a word that I like. So Radicata Nutrition is where you'll find everything about what I'm doing. And my book, Digestive Health with Real Food, is on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and chapters in Canada as well.
All right. Awesome. And we will link to all of that in the show notes if anyone's interested. Well, Aglaee, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've had an absolute blast.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Losers always whine about their best.